Yes. Okay, we are live.
We good?
I don't know
We're
what I
live?
clicked
Oh, there we go.
before.
Yep, I see it. Yay! Hello, people. No one. I see zero
Hey
people.
guys, we're sorry for technicalities. This is what happens when you get three history professionals trying to do tech for them. And we tried it before, but it didn't quite work.
We're all Luddites at heart.
It is difficult. But we are streaming what we have currently going on to our, not only our Facebook page, but to our YouTube page as well, so we can upload that later. It won't be available immediately after the stream, but we should have some time. So if you guys can chat in, let us know that you're watching, because it's not showing us anything.
Yeah, people are liking it.
Very much appreciated.
Which I appreciate, but please watch us. Don't dislike us.
Watch. Thanks for coming back, guys, and sticking through the tech problems. But hopefully, so far, it's been a better experience. I need to figure out why it did that on us. But, I've got three of you guys back. And unfortunately, you guys missed a really fascinating story about why Scott got into history. So
you'll have to just ask him at the end of his presentation.
Yeah, I guess.
I was bored. I was first. I was bored.
Oh, come on. See, now I've got the spinning wheel of not loading. How's it on your guys' end?
On my computer, it's showing the spinning wheel of not loading, but.
This is so great.
I don't know what that is, but incidentally, the spinning wheel of not loading would be a great album title.
I like that. You can take it, Scott. If you have any musical talent and want a band.
No. I can play the radio. That's about it.
Well, I mean, always. That? Carly's got a spinning wheel too. Guys, I don't know. This worked the other day.
I know. Maybe now it's working. Let me see.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, it's showing me now live. Okay. Hi, guys. If you're watching us, please give us some feedback. Hold on. Let me.
Besides that this isn't working, because we know.
Okay. It seems to be working. Anything gets recording, so.
I mean, that's a win.
May have just missed Scott's title of his next album, but.
Yeah, we're trying to encourage him to take up, music and stuff. Well, I still have a spinny thing of doom, but no time like the present to get some cocktails going, because with all that tech stuff, I kind of need a drink.
Yep.
Can't watch freezing up. I'm sorry, Denise. I don't know what is going on.
Are you hardwired in, or are you just connecting to the?
I'm just connected to Wi-Fi, which is what I've done all along. I don't think so. Where am I connected to? Yep, hold on. I might flip. Okay. How are we doing, guys? I switched some settings.
Okay.
Thanks for your patience, guys, as we try out this new software. We're definitely trying. It worked on Wednesday. We spent almost an hour doing tech. I spent time today making sure things worked on my end.
It's fine. We still got time.
We do. So I'm going to make a cocktail. And again, this is going to be going onto our YouTube channel. So please don't feel like you've missed anything. We're just unfortunately missing the live experience. So our ice machine broke today, so I'm having to improvise. Is that
you have to like use an ice pick, like how to go to like an ice house, and
I had to walk all the way back home to Canada. It was brutal. All right. So those that you have watched me make cocktails before, you know, there we go. You add salt to help enhance the flavors. I broke this trying to get the salt out earlier.
oh no!
Yeah. Go Team Stacy, because nothing's gonna go smoothly. So the first cocktail that I'm gonna make is it's called the Mary Pickford. It's actually kind of funny. Most times I have to really search for the cocktails that I'm gonna be making for the week, but these two just kind of fell into my lap, which makes me really happy. So this one was actually one of my friends that really enjoys history and rum. She just randomly sent me a message. She's like, "Oh my God, have you heard of this drink?" And I was like, "No." And I researched it and I was like, "This is perfect." So this was named for a silent movie actress, Mary Pickford, sorry. It's a rum forward cocktail. Both cocktails that we're making tonight are rum forward. This one is attributed to Eddie Wilkie, who's probably better known for his cocktail, the El Presidente. He fled to Cuba during the Prohibition because, like, booze. Give me liberty, or give me alcohol, or give me death. I don't know. Give me Cuba.
I like that modification.
So he, at the Colada shop in Washington, D.C. now, this cocktail is being remade and everything. So it has white rum, pineapple juice, grenadine, maraschino liqueur, and then it is garnished with 2 brandy cherries. So I have those when I made cherry bounce earlier this year. So that's pretty awesome. And we've got 5 viewers. I feel like there's something going wrong here, guys. We have a lot more than that. I'm sorry, Scott. So I'm going to start with equal parts of rum. This one has Ernest Hemingway's signature on it, so you know it's legit.
It's historical.
It's totes historical. I also hate how this pours, so I'm using a fancy little pour thing.
I like it.
Every other time I've tried to make a cocktail with this rum, it's like sprayed all over.
Now, Scott, are you a rum fan?
That's not my least favorite, so yeah.
That was very diplomatic. Alright. And then it also calls for grenadine, which I made myself today. Grenadine is really easy to make, and it gets a bad rep because of roses. And like, I have nothing against the company. It's a great starter, like, to build up your bar. But you know, we're historian people. We make things. So it calls for 1/4 ounce of the grenadine.
Just showing us all up with the homemade grenadine.
That I quickly whipped up this afternoon.
Yeah.
It's honestly really easy. All you have to do is take pomegranate juice, equal parts of that, and sugar, add a little bit of orange blossom water, and what else did I add? Oh, I added vodka just to give it. I'm sorry, Allie.
No, you're fine. I mean, if we have to, we just go and just record it and just throw it up.
I think that's might be what we have to do. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to try to turn off my firewall. I'm sorry, guys. But we're back. Now I can actually see who's watching on this, so that's better.
Yeah, before it wasn't showing up, so now we can see all the friendly, maybe not the friendly faces, but numbers of friendly folks that are joining in.
Yeah. All right. So I have turned off my firewall, which is dangerous, but I did it. So that works out better. Thank you guys so much for your patience. So much. I'm a little embarrassed. So we were just talking about how I made grenadine this afternoon. It is pretty easy to make, and in all honesty, with how easily palm juice is now, it's like, I feel like it's cheaper and more flavorful to make it yourself. And it honestly took me tops from opening the fridge to get the palm juice and 15 active minutes.
Yeah.
And then it calls for a bar spoon of maraschino liqueur.
Nice.
I guesstimated. And that's it. So you just shake that. This is the first time I've made a cocktail sitting down.
It's very formal.
I know. Is it though? Because most bartenders, they sit down to do this.
So if you guys are tuning in, you are joining us for the pre-show, which is a time where Stacey makes delicious cocktails and we all just get sad that we can't have them. B gets to enjoy some commentary from myself and Scott, who is our speaker tonight. And C gives us a little bit of a window of time for us to work out some tech issues. So give us some feedback if there's anything that is not sounding right, or if we're freezing, or if we sound good, please let us know.
All right. So that is cocktail number 1. Look how pretty it is.
It's a pretty color.
Yeah, I really like it. So these glasses will be available on our online store, which I've fixed because that apparently didn't tell me all the things that were wrong with that until I played with it today. So these will be available for purchase. Please feel free. We also have the stainless steel tumblers that are for sale. Their sale price ends on Sunday, and we'll be putting koozies up. Good. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Matt. We also have these cool shirts with the new Folklore Friday logo on them. They're pretty neat. I'm going to turn the light on in my room because I realized I sat on my porch, but the sun is going down.
All right. So the second cocktail is the one that Scott actually gave me the inspiration for. And there were several around when I looked online, and I actually sent him a message today going, where's your brainchild? Because now I'm confused. So what I decided to go with was the 1996 cocktail from Tony Abu Ghanem at the Starlight Room. It's a nightclub in the Sir Francis Drake Hotel. And this is in San Francisco, so he was inspired. Thank you very much, Matt. It's purple. So this was actually inspired by the trolley cars that would drive past. So, most people will drink a sidecar, which again, like I mentioned before, has very argumentative history. Every country is trying to claim, there are 3 or 4 countries that are trying to claim it as their own. But this one was just a different take. It's a San Francisco take on it for the trolley car. So definitely a good ad for tonight. So this actually is a spice rum. So, going away from your rum and Coke, I was just about to pour because that's the kind of Friday it is.
Because it's a San Francisco-based drink, is there Fernet in it perchance?
There actually isn't, which is weird.
What?
Yeah.
Scott, have you ever had Fernet?
Not that I know of.
It's so good.
Oh, God. I will never drink that again. Let us know if anyone's had Fernet. I feel like it's a very polarizing drink.
Dude, that is a spirit. Hey, Joe, I made a cocktail with it last week, and it was amazing. Oh, Allie.
It's like that. It has like a very astringent licorice kind of flavor.
I think we need something different then.
I don't know. I got it when I was in San Francisco, but it was just.
Well, different brands might have different botanicals in it as well. Because what I had last week was not. It's bitter because it's an Amaro kind of thing, but I didn't find that it was like that. But who knows?
Yeah.
My taste buds could have been off last week. It's the roller coaster. So I just added orange curacao, triple sec, Grand Marnier, however fancy you want to be. I'm not going too terribly fancy. So it also calls for lime juice. So I squeezed this ahead of time because I was actually on the ball today. And egg white.
We're just running a little tiny bit behind, folks, so we'll probably get started in about 5 minutes after 7. So stick with us. They'll give you a chance. Go get a drink. If Stacy's inspired you,
Yeah.
get a cocktail or beer.
Be inspired. Simple G. There's nothing wrong with a simple G and T. All right. So that is what goes into that in a nutshell. I almost forgot my salt. So I got these salts as a Christmas present. I think a year or 2 years ago. I was actually chastised a little bit for not using it. I was like, no, you only use a little bit at a time. And it's so humid. It's already, there we go. Good enough. So this one is, it's a Thai ginger salt, which is really delicious. And then vanilla salt. I think I've used that one other weeks. But so noisy. And I got it. All right. Traditionally, I would clean everything out beforehand. And if I was making drinks for you guys in person, you know that I would be doing that. But it's just my wife and I. And she just made a snarky remark.
I feel like as wives do, right?
I mean, yeah. That is the wifely duty. All right. So then you just do a little twist. You try to do that over the glass because you're expressing. Garnishes, I always thought were just useless things. But as I actually started to drink in earnest, past college, I realized that they actually, when done right, do something important to the drink. And I can tell now when they're not in. So here we have the Trolley sidecar and the Mary Pickford rum base. Cheers, guys. I don't know what I'm drinking because my wife hasn't told me which one she wants. Happy life.
Let us know which one you would like to drink more. I love rum, so I will not discriminate against the other. Oh, I know, we're like.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody. Thanks for joining in. So you are joining us for a little bit of a later pre-show, pre-game, as Scott called it. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. On the screen here we have Scott's blog, which I'm sure you'll hear a little bit more about during the presentation tonight. But we're just excited to have Scott here.
We really are. I am just trying to catch myself up for comments so I can actually, help out.
Yay. So Scott, if you had your choice of the two beverages, which one would you drink? The sidecar or the Mary Pickford?
I'll try the Mary Pickford.
Nice.
Excellent. Good, because I'll take the other one.
It's Friday. I mean, we've all earned it, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So real quick before we get started, and I pass the program over to Stacy and Scott, there are lots of really great ways you can support us tonight. We're excited to bring you this free program. Stacy and myself are wearing some cool Folklore Friday swag with a new logo. So I will reverse here on the screen. So you can feel free to go to our website and pick up some. We'll post a link in the comments section. Some people will get free koozies with their order. And we have some neat other new item this week that you'll have to go and check out on the Facebook page that's discounted. So every week we'll have a discounted gift shop item that's specially themed. And of course, you can just leave us a lovely donation. Any amount counts and goes a long way, especially right now.
Exactly. So this week's actually, I mean, it's not a secret, Allie. It's already out.
Oh.
This week's is the
Little surprise.
And it comes with a stainless steel straw, which is really cool. It's easier to drink when you're in a mask wearing a straw. As I learned last night, it's not easy to get out of a pint glass.
Nope. I just bought stainless steel straws for my, cocktail corner, and they are the best things.
Mm-hmm. This also has a cleaner for it too, so you're not going to have to worry about any sort of.
That's great.
Yeah. So they are on sale for $10 right now in the gift shop. So hey, Kelly.
I'll drop a link.
Yeah, please do drop a link. They are for sale in our gift shop tonight. They will go up to a non-discounted rate on either Sunday or Monday, depending on if I get to work on Sunday. And then on either Sunday or Monday, we'll discount what's it called? We'll reveal another item. I'm excited for it. Especially as the cool weather starts to kick in. So that will be available on either Sunday or Monday, and there'll of course be a crossover. So if you wanted to get two things for a really good discount, please do feel free to sign that up or purchase those. I'm sorry that we're phrasing up a little bit. I wonder if it's because I put live captions on it. I was trying to make this good for hearing impaired people.
Oh, we'll figure it out. It's all being recorded, so you can mess with it.
Yeah, we'll have it available on our website at some point this weekend.
Cool.
I guess with that, I mean, you guys aren't here to listen to me rattle on about stuff. You're here for the man, Scott, who is an amazing resource. I can't tell you, Scott, how many times when I first came to the area, let me rephrase, how often still I look to your website, your blog, just for source information that I need for various projects on site. Your research is very thorough and just fantastically done and presented.
Thank you. Yeah, it's one of the reasons I started doing it, because there wasn't, I wanted something like this. And
right.
there wasn't really a kind of a central clearinghouse sort of information about the area. So I decided to start making it.
You did a really good job. Like your pictures are fantastic, and how much research and time you put into the background stories and accuracy.
Yeah, sometimes I get stuck trying to find just to confirm one little fact or something I could just put in and go over, but I want to know, okay, I'm pretty sure that's who that is. I want to make sure. And 3 days later, okay, yeah, that's who it is.
You also do it in a way that's very relatable too. Like one of the reasons that we keep asking you back is that you very much identify with like our mantra that history is not boring, and how we try to keep connections to it and create those connections. And you do a really good job as you're writing out your blog stories and posts, that it really connects with somebody, and it makes it that much more inviting.
Yeah, I'm not an architect. I'm not an architectural historian. I'm not a historian of any sort, but other people can write about the construction of houses and the windows and all that. And I might put a little bit about that, but I find it more interesting to research the people who live there, because all these farms and houses and mills, those are people's homes and workplaces. And if you dig far enough, you can find a lot of interesting stories about these people. And that's what I find interesting.
I think that's what most people end up finding interesting too. So without further ado, let's let you do your thing, and we can all hop aboard the trolley with you.
Okay.
I love that.
All right, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining in tonight. And obviously thank Stacy and Allie and everybody at Green Bank for having me back. I enjoy these. This is a fun thing to do. And now when we can't all get together, this is the way to do it. And I hope you said bear with us. This is new to all of us, but adapting to new things and new technology is really just a part of life, especially now. And it also happens to be part of our story tonight. Because in the late 19th, early 20th century in Mill Creek 100, and with all due respect to all the beautiful houses and farms and mills and churches, there was only one real tourist destination in Mill Creek 100, and that was the Brandywine Springs Amusement Park. It was located, of course, where the county park of the same name is now at Falkland Road and Newport Gap Pike. And it had all kinds of attractions to draw Victorian and Edwardian era crowds. There were rides like boats and swings and carousel and even an early roller coaster. There were games like you would see at a carnival today and some that you wouldn't. There were theaters with shows and operas and concerts and guest speakers. There was one of the first purpose-built movie theaters in Delaware. And of course there was food in restaurants and in all kinds of concession stands. But one of the most easily overlooked attractions of the park was just its location. In the era before air conditioning, when most people lived in the cities and most of the guests came from the cities, just having a day out in the country, out of the hot, sweaty, smelly city could be a real treat. But the problem was how to get there. Brandywine Springs is about 6 or 7 miles outside of Wilmington, and before cars, it was too far to walk, and most city dwellers didn't have horses, let alone carriages. So if they were going to get out to the park, they were going to need help. But before we get to that, it's nice to take a step back for a second, because I don't think you can really understand the Trolleys without understanding where they were going. What would become Brandywine Springs Amusement Park began as a resort hotel built by a group of Quaker businessmen from Wilmington. It opened in 1827. It ran to varying degrees of success for about 20 years or so. By the early 1850s, it was operating as a military school. Over the Christmas break of 1853, a fire starting in a stovepipe burned the hotel down and destroyed it. Well, instead of, I'll get this here. We'll show you. I hope that, there we go. So, this is Brandywine Springs, the original amusement park, the original hotel. So the hotel here. After it burned down in 1853, instead of rebuilding it its former glory, what they did was take these 3 buildings here, which were houses built by an earlier owner, Matthew Newkirk, built one house in the middle for himself and one on each side for his daughters. They combined those to form the second hotel. And if you look closely, you can even see the roof lines of those 3 original houses here, here, and here. And this hotel also kind of got along. It did okay, but didn't really particularly thrive. By 1886, the property was owned by William Jenks Fell, who owned the spice mill down the road at Falkland. And he brought in a new manager for the hotel. This was Philadelphian Richard W. Crook. And to help his hotel, Crook started adding a few things around the grounds, like a picnic grove, croquet courts, even a small merry-go-round. It wasn't too long before he realized that he was getting more people coming to the property for these things than he was for the hotel, which between you and me was maybe not in the greatest shape at the time. So, being the astute businessman that he was, Crook started adding to these things and upgrading as outdoor amenities. And this was the beginning of the amusement park. But again, the problem that Crook had was how to get more people to the park. The Wilmington Western tracks run along the edge of the property, but there's only so many people that the train can bring. Plus, at first, people had to get off at the Falkland station up the line a little bit and walk back. And this is what the parking lot looked like at the time. So what Crook was going to need if he wanted his property to grow was that most recent of technological innovations for public transportation, and that was an electric trolley line. But considering how far out of town Brandywine Springs was, building a trolley line was one of those things that fell into the category of easier said than done. And since any useful trolley line would begin in the city, the first order of business was to try to get the rights to lay tracks in the city. And since Delaware politics and regulatory oversight was no better then than it is now, that was another one of those easier said than done things. See, there already were trolley tracks and a trolley company in Wilmington, and the Wilmington City Railway was not really interested in having any competition. Crook's first attempt was with the chartering of the Wilmington and Brandywine Springs Railway in April of 1893. At that time, he had a plan and a charter, but no money. Kind of like me, except for the plan and the charter. But now, interestingly, the original plan was significantly different than what would eventually be built. The 1893 charter had the line starting at the steamboat pier on the Delaware River at Edgemoor. And this was down Health and Gordon Heights at Edgemoor. There was even a small park there at the time also, and they figured that this would be easier to have people get off there rather than taking the boat all the way down and disembarking at the steamboat dock in Wilmington. Now, the original charter, we'll come back up here again. The original idea was to have the line come up through Edgemoor, go down Philadelphia Pike, go across the Wilmington City tracks in Wilmington, and then go out through Newport, Stanton, Kymency, and Marshallton. But due to lack of funding, that was never built. As Crook continued to lobby the legislature over the next few years, the plan continued to evolve and change. And eventually, the plan was that Wilmington and Brandywine Springs would build their own tracks in Wilmington, starting from down near the train station at King and 4th Street, down near King Street, go up King, then out 2nd Street, all the way out to Greenhill Avenue, and exit the city around there. However, it wasn't until about 1897, and we'll come back up here, it wasn't until about 1897 that Crook finally had the funding to build anything. That was when he had wealthy carpet manufacturers James and John Dobson of Philadelphia agree to back him. Now, construction was set to begin in August of that year, but it didn't actually begin until November 20th, and that was significant for a reason. So these charters that the trolley companies got from the state were not open-ended. They had expiration dates. And if the line was not completed by a certain date, then the charter was no longer valid. Now, Crook had already received several extensions for his original 1893 charter, and at this point, he was staring down a deadline of January 1st, 1898. If he didn't have at least one car travel the line before then the charter would no longer be valid, and the whole endeavor would be in doubt. But in addition to the opposition that he had from the City Railway, he also had to compete with the newly constructed Ellesmere and Wilmington Electric Railway. And they were not interested in any competition as well. they actually got a last-minute injunction that prevented Crook from building tracks that crossed any of theirs. Finally, though, on December 30th, the court issued an injunction and allowed the Wilmington and Brandywine Springs to lay some temporary tracks where they were barred before, and they completed the line to 6th and what's now Cleveland Avenue. Now, in preparation for this, they had an old horse-drawn trolley car waiting for them out at Brandywine Springs, one probably very similar to this, which is shown at the City Railway's Middle Depot, which is now Trolley Square. You can see this is the old B&O railroad station behind there, and I believe Kelly's Logan House behind on here. The car left Brandywine Springs at 1:30 in the afternoon of December 31st, 1897, pulled by 2 mules. Because the problem was that although the track for the most part was completed, the electrical system was not. So they had to use mules. Now, at the very beginning, one of the first things that they had coming out of Brandywine Springs is this high trestle bridge that crossed Red Clay Creek. Now, the mules refused to walk across the bridge, so they had to do it the really old-fashioned way and push the car across by hand. So they got across through there, and it didn't go a whole lot smoother after that. The line wasn't really ballasted yet, so the car first got stuck somewhere near Greenbank. And as the newspaper article the next day said, 2 mules were hitched to the car, and it was accompanied by several horses and a gang of Italians to render assistance when needed. Wouldn't it be nice if we all traveled with a gang of Italians to render assistance when needed? Over the contested section of track in Ellesmere, wooden stringers substituted for rails. The entire 6-mile trip took over 5 hours to complete. They didn't get through Ellesmere until well after dark. Now, it wasn't pretty, but the letter of the law was fulfilled, and the line was saved. Yay! After that, things started to get a little bit smoother. In May, Crook employed a time-honored method of dealing with business problems, and he just bought the Ellesmere and Wilmington outright. That slide a couple minutes ago, the Ellesmere and Wilmington car had a man standing in the front of it. That was Richard Crook, and that picture was probably taken not long after the purchase. Now, at this point, the Wilmington City Railway was under new management, and they made a few deals with manager Crook. Deals were made for fare transfers, for allowing Wilmington and Brandywine Springs cars to travel over the City Railway tracks, and the City Railway also agreed to provide power for Crook until his new powerhouse was completed. There were still a few issues, though, but they finally got up and running a little bit. On December 7th, 1898, the first inspection trip was made over the line, and regular passenger service began the following Monday, December 12th. There were, as I said, still a few holdups. On the evening of Christmas Eve, service was suspended because the bridge crossing over the Wilmington and Northern tracks in Ellesmere needed to be reinforced. Now, this 2-week job ended up taking until the end of January. In the spring, there was also a stoppage because there was a dispute with the City Railway over whose crews were going to man the cars in the city. By late March, though, the service was up and running. The next round of fighting started in the fall of 1899. The City Railway had been sold again, and the new management was not as accommodating as the old. And there was still an open question over who was going to be able to lay tracks down 6th Street. So the City Railway applied for permission. Crook submitted his application the next day. And this was all a very public fight, It all played out in the papers. There was a lot of public pressure about it. And since the City Railway had been cutting service lately, a lot of the public sided with Crook. He always seemed to be a very energetic and warm and charismatic guy, and was always fairly well liked by the public and by his employees. And both companies also tried to gain support of the public by announcing plans to extend their lines, the City Railway into Newport and Crook into Marshallton. Now here's where the story gets a little bit crazy. Responsibility for granting the access to 6th Street fell to the Wilmington Street and Sewer Department. But it seemed that they really had no interest in being involved in this at all. At first, they said they weren't going to grant any new franchises. Then both companies reapplied, and they granted the rights to the City Railway a week later. After another week of public pressure, they reversed their decision and gave Crooks the rights instead. And as you can imagine, the City Railway was not at all happy about this. They took the matter to court, arguing that their charter gave them exclusive rights to lay track in the city. Now, nothing more really happened for the next few months, but then in January of 1900, the City Railway ran out of patience and forced the matter. 170 workers began laying tracks down 6th Street. They got about a block and a half before work was halted and the superintendent was actually arrested. Now, the city came out about a week later and removed all the tracks. Things quieted down again until April, when the City Railway won the next round. The court ruled that the Wilmington and Brandywine Springs had violated its charter and actually did not have any right to lay track in the city. The funny thing is, though, that even while all this was going on, Wilmington and Brandywine Springs cars were still running over City Railway tracks in Wilmington. Now, this is how I imagine this next part playing out. So, Mr. Crook, now you don't have a company with any rights in Wilmington. But what if I did? But you don't. But what if I did? But you don't. Hold my root beer. I'll be right back. See, Crook was a teetotaler and he didn't drink. That's why Brandywine Springs was always a dry park. So where Crook was off to was Dover. And in late April, a new company appeared in the legislative record. Now, on May 1st, it was named the People's Railway. And he laid claim to just about every unoccupied street in Wilmington. Crook did not play small ball. See, he asked the city to approve a line from Lancaster Avenue over Green Hill and down 6th Street all the way to Pine Street. Since the city still kind of leaned in his direction, they granted the franchise, and on May 15th, 1900, the People's Railway was incorporated. Now, naturally, the City Railway went back to court, but finally in September, the court ruled in Crook's favor. On October 4th, the People's Railway began constructing its city lines. The target date for the opening of the People's Line was April 15th, 1901, but there were some delays and problems that pushed the date back to May. Finally, on May 26th, first cars ran. Ever the showman, 2 days later, Crook scheduled an inspection trip. It carried about 300 people, including city council members and a 30-piece band. And when they got out to the park, they had a special dinner and a show, and Crook showed off all the new attractions that had been built at the park. And it may kind of be hard to remember at this point, but the whole point of the trolley line was to get people out to the park. Now, regular service began on May 30th, Decoration Day, which was the traditional opening day for the park. It was a huge success. There were about 13,000 people that rode the trolleys that day. But where exactly did the line go? In the city, at least at first, it was pretty straightforward. And let's take a look. take a look at this map. This was the original line. It went from the train station up King Street, down the long contested 6th Street, out over a few blocks down Greenhill Avenue, a few blocks over Lancaster Avenue, and then out what was at the time private right-of-way, but which is now Cleveland Avenue. And since I like to verify what I read, here is the line. Here's the next section. It went out, as I said, down Cleveland, what's now Cleveland Avenue, came down along DuPont Road for a little bit, then veered off and over to go up and over the Wilmington and Northern tracks. And this is the bridge that they had problems with back in '99, and down along over what's now Northern Avenue to meet up with Wilmington Avenue, and went out what's now Kirkwood Highway, exiting out of Newport, or actually out of Ellesmere. And like I said, since I like to verify what I read, here's a topographic map from 1904. And this is the People's Railway coming along here, down over DuPont Road, over the Wilmington and Northern tracks, and then out here. This is an interesting little snippet here. It's a very busy section. Even in this small section here, there are 3 different trolley lines and 3 or 4 different railroads. And I should say at this point that a lot of the information that I gathered for this talk came from a book called Diamond State Trolleys by Harold E. Cox. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, I highly recommend trying to find a copy of it. It has a lot more information about the People's Railway, the City Railway, and all the other lines that operated in northern Newcastle County. It also has a lot of maps of the city routes, and they changed a lot. Like almost every year, the routes in the city were a little bit different. So for now, we'll leave that alone and won't deal too much more with that. But what we do want to do is take a look at the rest of the People's Line going out to Brandywine Springs. Now, as it came out through Ellesmere, this is what it looked like. This is the People's Railway tracks over to the right here. And I've tried to figure out where this is before, and I haven't been able to match up any of the houses. It's somewhere along Wilmington Avenue, or what's now Kirkwood Highway in Ellesmere. The line was double tracked pretty much the entire way. As it exited Ellesmere, it went up on Greenbank Road, which was the only road, because remember, this section of Kirk Highway was not here yet. As it came up Greenbank Road, it came to in front of the workhouse at Greenbank, which was actually under construction at the time. There's a picture of it showing the trolley tracks running in front of it, and a little trolley stop here. Once the workhouse was up and running, the trolley line actually had a special car that it used to ferry prisoners from the courthouse in Wilmington, which is located where Rodney Square is now, to bring the prisoners out to the workhouse at Greenbank. Now, after the line passed the workhouse, it veered to the north a bit and ran along the high ground along the east side of Red Clay Creek, and actually went through what are now the backyards of some houses in today's Albertson Park and Falkland Heights. The line came up, went around over the trestle bridge that we saw earlier, and entered the park. Before it did, though, right around this area here, in 1907, was built the Kaimensi Water Company, Kaimensi Spring Company. This is a picture of its bottling plant. This was owned actually by Richard Crook and some of the other managers from the park. And they shipped their water bottles by train and by trolley. This is a picture of the freight car that was used to ship the water bottles. It was incidentally also the same car that was used to ship prisoners out to the workhouse. Now, after passing Condensy Springs, the line went over the train tracks in the creek and across the aforementioned trestle bridge. What's interesting is, if you've ever taken the beautiful Wilmington Western ride, you can still see the abutments on the east side of Red Clay Creek. This is the eastern abutment for the bridge, and some of the footings, the supports for the bridge, are still visible. This is the train track running through here. Now, after it crossed the creek and got on the park side, it turned and ran between the hillside and Red Clay Creek along what's now the park's maintenance road, and came up to the entrance of the amusement park. It ended right in front of the entrance archway, the entrance to the park. This is a then and now picture of that area. If you can see in this newer picture, there are 4 white posts right here towards the center. These mark where the entrance archway stood. The tracks came and did a little loop. Passengers disembarked right in front of the entrance archway, and the loop came around. Now, here's might be a little confusing at first, a map of Brandywine Springs, the amusement park, showing all the lines. This is the People's Trolley line coming up here. The trestle bridge here loops around into the park, and the original loop right in front of the entrance archway. In 1904, an extension was built, a spur into the park, that looped into the park and allowed passengers to get off at the new trolley terminus inside the park. The line then came down around the cross-hide run again, and then exited out on the same track. Now, in this line coming in at the top and the spur coming out here, we'll get to shortly. This is what the trolley terminus looked like. As you can see, it was built in the same rustic style that the rest of the park was. You can see a trolley coming into the trolley terminus here. And if you look, you can see the power lines over top. Now, at this point, it would probably be kind of redundant to say that the electric trolley lines ran on electricity. Well, for the most part, there weren't really power companies as such around then, so the trolley companies had to provide their own electricity. Now, this actually led to the rise of trolley parks, of which there were literally hundreds in the country at the time, and of which Brandywine Springs was sort of but backwards. Now, the trolley companies realized that they weren't making any money off of their electricity if nobody was riding the trolleys. So they decided to create their own destinations and build these trolley parks. They were usually a few miles outside of town, usually on water like a creek, a river, a lake somewhere. And it provided a destination for people to ride on weekends and holidays. And one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that the City Railway had their own trolley park, Shellpot Park. It was located north of Wilmington, along North Market Street, around Lee Boulevard, same area where the Sears used to be years ago. So this is another reason that the City Railway didn't really want any competition from Crook and from Brandywine Springs. Now, Shellpot was a true trolley park. It was built by and owned by the trolley company. As I said, Brandywine Springs was kind of like a trolley park in reverse. So the park was there first, and then the trolley line was built to service the park. Now, the nearness of Shellpot Park was one of the reasons that Richard Crook had to keep the fares to go to Brandywine Springs at 5 cents, even though the distance out to the springs would justify a 10-cent fare. So it only cost a nickel to go to Shellpot. And Crook's thinking was proven right in the spring of 1905 when prices were temporarily raised to 10 cents or 15 cents for a round trip out to Brandywine Springs. Turns out people didn't like that. There was a huge backlash. Park attendance and ridership dropped. And by mid-June, the 5-cent fares were reinstated. Now, Brandywine Springs actually had a small powerhouse on site that originally provided power for the park and in the early days to power the trolley line. In May 1901, however, Crook opened a new powerhouse and trolley barn in Wilmington at 6th and Hawley Streets. And the amazing thing is that most of it is still there. Look at these pictures. This is an area that is here. These were offices. The original car barn was right behind it. And down at the far end was the new, bigger trolley barn that was built in 1904. And actually, I think the only thing that's missing is just the powerhouse section in the middle. But back to our story. After the joy and celebration of finally getting the victory of getting the line approved and built and up and running, it's ironic that its moment of greatest tragedy occurred almost immediately. Now, remember when I said that about 13,000 passengers rode the line that first day, May 30th? Sadly, not all of them made it home safely, or a few not at all. Shortly after midnight, on that night, as the last cars were making their way home from the festivities at Brandywine Springs, one of the cars coming down the hill on 6th Street, it had its brakes fail. If anyone's familiar with that area is a fairly steep hill coming down, kind of, if you're coming from the west side of the city down to 95, it's a fairly steep hill. And the cars that People's Railway initially had were fairly large, and they were equipped with air brakes. And the City Railway had some cars like this, but only a few, and they only had them in service for a few months. Now, as car 5 came down the hill, the brakes failed. It ran out of control down the hill, and somewhere between Franklin and Harrison Streets, ran into the next car ahead of it. The two of them locked together, careened down another 6 blocks, and down around Jefferson Street, ran into a third car headed the opposite direction, coming from downtown. 2 men were killed, 2 of the drivers, and 40 more people were injured. Now, eventually, Crook... Yes, I will. I'll go back to any of the pictures later on. And Crook eventually did phase out those larger cars, partially for safety and partially because they were more expensive to operate. But the People's Railway, after that, thrived and grew. The downtown routes, as I said, changed many, many times to maximize profits and to compete with the City Railway. They would run cars down different streets or go different directions. When they built a return track on 7th Street in September 1901, that helped a lot to ease congestion. Let me see. No, actually, I think that Other Peoples is probably a family name. He named the Peoples because it was the trolley line for the people. Now, as the line grew, both companies, as I said, were always looking to build new loops into new areas. And the People's Railway did have some notable entries in this area. In June 1906, they completed a line out to Hagley to service the workers out in Hagley. And this is a picture of the People's Railway trolley along Wagoners Row in Hagley. In 1909, after some more fighting with the city of Wilmington and the city railway, a spur was built that terminated at 4th and Church Streets. Now, I'm not sure whether it went straight down 4th or whether it went down Church Street from 7th. But the purpose was to connect with the Wilson Steamboat Line docks at their dock at the foot of 4th Street. Now, the Wilson Line ran excursions from Philadelphia and Chester, and the City Railway already had service from there to take people directly to Shellpot. Now, once Crook was able to run cars from there, they were able to get people to get off and take the trolley out to Brandywine Springs, and the two companies actually issued a brochure together, a little pamphlet that tried to urge people to take the trolley out to Brandywine Springs. The last major addition to the line came in 1909, when the long-awaited spur into Marshallton was built. I remember they'd been talking about this for 10 years, since the Wilmington and Brandywine Springs Railway back in 1899. And there's a reason that there was interest. By 1909, there were about 100 Wilmington residents who worked at the fiber mill in Marshallton, and about 75 Marshallton residents who worked in the city. Now, during the off-season, the cars ran straight through from Marshallton to Wilmington. During the summer, you had to change cars at Brandywine Springs and get on a different car to go into the city. Now, the line ran out of Brandywine. This is Brandywine Springs Park at the top here. The line came up out of the park along Washington Avenue. Now, not coincidentally, at the corner of Washington Avenue and Newport Gap Pike, a lot of you may be familiar, there's that large white house that recently had been the White House B&B. And this was Richard Crook's house. He built that in 1903. So the line came out past his house. Crosswell was just a field at the time, curved a bit before it got to where Kirkwood Highway would soon be, and came down the hill here into Marshallton, past the mill owner's house, and ran along Greenbank Road to the bridge at Duncan Road, Newport Road. In this aerial photograph, which I love, from about 1940, you can see, to get your bearings, this is Kirkwood Highway at the top here, Old Capitol Trail down at the bottom, Greenbank Road running up here, and Duncan Road running up here. And in this picture, you can see the, spoiler alert, now abandoned People's Railway line running like a scar across the field, coming down, and then it ran along Greenbank Road and ended just out of the picture here. Now, this is a notice that probably would have been posted in Marshallton somewhere right around the time when the line first started running. It gives information about a time of the trolleys and about ticket prices. And if you read through here quickly, you notice there's a mention of David Ecoff, grocer. His grocery store was located in the brick building that's still there now. It now, I think, still houses Events Unlimited on Greenbank Road, just off of Duncan Road. And Mullen's Barber Shop was right across the street from there. Now, here are two pictures of cars at the end of the line on the Marshallton Spur. This is looking up Greenbank Road. Here, the mill would be in the background. Here, this is the edge of the wing wall for the bridge crossing Red Clay Creek. This is the end of the line here. Now, the cars were bidirectional, so at this point, the driver would just get out, flip the pole at the top, going the other way, then the cars could just head back here, head back to Brandywine Springs. There were a lot of different types of cars that ran over the lines over the years, and many of them were actually built right here in Wilmington by the Jackson and Sharp Company. During the summer months, they would usually use open-air cars like this. In 1912, they got what were called bungalow cars. And these were the first pay-as-you-enter cars in Wilmington, and some of the first experiments with extremely lightweight cars. They were built by the by the Cincinnati Car Company, and were apparently designed by Crook himself. As you can see, the interior of one of these, they were pretty sparse with just bench seating down the sides. And one of the things different about this kind of car was that there was no front right door. To keep things easier, you entered the car in the rear and then exited in the front on the left. Now, the problem with that is on double-track lines, that was a recipe for disaster, potentially, because you could be stepping out right in front of an oncoming car. So if you look closely to the sign here in the middle, it says leave by front platform on single track, leave by rear platform on double track. So on double track lines, left in the back so that you wouldn't get hit by an oncoming car. Now, what you can't tell from these black and white and sepia tone pictures was that the Ellesmere and Wilmington and the Wilmington and Brandywine Springs cars were painted a rich maroon and deep straw with gold ornamentation and aluminum lettering. When the People's Railway got started, the cars went to a light green and yellow or cream colored color scheme. And all of them had rich wooden interiors of ash, birch, oak, and cherry. Here is another open-air car in a very non-city setting. And of course, they had closed cars for use in winter months. And this car here, this is the last car actually ever ordered by the People's Railway. It was delivered to the company in January of 1914. But, of course, we have to keep in mind that in the end, this trolley line was there to service, promote, and assist the park. And besides being an astute businessman, Richard Crook was also a pretty good showman. I mean, he wasn't the greatest showman, but he was pretty good. And the trolley ride out to the park was always promoted as an event in and of itself and not just a way to get to the park. In the early teens, the companies ran theater and opera cars. There one time was a car that was made to look like a giant shoe to advertise Baby Doll Day. And for the holidays, you had things like the Maltese and the Star. And what's funny is once I really started looking at these cars, I noticed I think it might be the same car. If you look closely at these, at the Maltese on the top, on the back, that sure looks like the top of the Star. And on this one at the bottom, the far end, that sure looks like the top of the Maltese cross on the other end. Now, in any case, we had cars like this, and of course, Old Glory, which again may just be the Star. There's a star down the other side, so they may have just reused a lot of these decorations. But as you see, all these pictures were taken around the trolley terminus that we saw earlier. And it's hard to read, but the sign above the trolley car here is lit up with light bulbs, and it says welcome. That was actually an interesting thing about the park. It had, as we said, electricity fairly early, and light bulbs. That entrance archway at the entrance to the park was actually all lit up by light bulbs, and at night it was probably more electric light than anyone had seen in one place by that time. And all these last three pictures also came from that joint brochure that the People's Railway and the Wilson Steamboat Line put out. Now, what was probably the high watermark for the People's Trolley came on a day like this one, July 4th, 1911. On that day alone, about 35,000 people rode people's trolleys. That's about half the current population of Wilmington. Cars arrived at the park about every 2 minutes throughout most of the day. And although it had successes like that, and it did a good job promoting the park, the line itself was never really much of a financial winner, mostly due to drop-off during the winter months. Now, the City Railway was always looking to buy Crook out, but he always declined. With his backers' money, he could keep going. Now, unfortunately for Crook, and I guess for Dobson's family, John Dobson died in 1911. After that, it was more of a struggle. By making some cuts and finally a fare increase, Crook was able to keep going for another 4 years. Finally, though, in May of 1915, Crook sold the trolley line and the rights to the amusement park to the Wilmington and Philadelphia Traction Company, which had bought out the City Railway back in 1910. And he took a well-earned retirement. I mean, his retirement was to Ellesmere, but it was still a well-earned retirement. Now, the line and the park were never really the same after that. The new company merged, consolidated a lot of the city lines, got rid of all the duplicate, redundant lines. The line out to Brandywine Springs stayed in operation, but it was no longer the sole focus of its company. Over the next few years, it just seemed that less money and less advertising and upkeep was put into Brandywine Springs and the Springs line, more into Shellpot Park. My feeling has always been that Shellpot was, their park, so it always took precedence over Brandywine Springs. They did still try to promote the park somewhat, as this car from 1915 shows. This car from 1920. But if you notice a couple things, for one thing, the park is now opening in late June instead of late May. And the big attractions it lists are the concerts and the safe, refreshing 7-mile trolley ride, not the rides in the park, a lot of which were not even operating by that point. But before we address the ultimate decline of the People's Railway, as important as it was to the success of Brandywine Springs, it was not the only line that brought guests into it. While the People's line was bringing guests from Wilmington and points east, there was another line coming from the north bringing guests to the park. In May of 1899, the Westchester-Kennett-Wilmington Electric Railway was chartered with ambitions not quite as great as its name and a future that would be even less so. It never ended up getting anywhere near Westchester, and it only made it to Wilmington for a short time with the help of the People's Railway. The original plan was to connect with the People's Railway at Brandywine Springs, then build a line northward through Kennett Square to Unionville, and connect with a proposed extension of the Westchester Street Railway's Lenape line. Only part of that plan ever happened. The first thing that the Kennett Trolley, as it was widely known, had to do was wait for the People's Trolley to be built, because the connection through to Wilmington was key to the whole plan. And once that part was in place, the contract was drawn up to build the first portion of the line from Kennett Square to Oxford, going through Avondale and Westgrove. For that stretch, most of 1902 was spent securing rights of way and negotiating with various borough councils. Not much actual construction work was really done. Construction was underway on the main line now, at various places in Pennsylvania and Delaware. There were gaps, obstructions, and holdups at several points, so the first actual run took place on January 1st, 1903, going from Birch Road on the south end of town to Clifton Mills, which is north of Yorkland. It took until January 30th to make the first run into Kennett Square. And the holdup there was for the bridge over the Pennsylvania Railroad to be completed. This is the first car to come into Kennett Square. Now the trolley barn for the line was located on Birch Road on the south end of Kennett Square, and it's actually still there. And it now is the home of the Braylock Brewery, which after all this stuff ends, I may have to get up there and check them out, you know, for historical reasons. For the next few months, runs were made at irregular intervals. They still didn't have any track below Clifton Mills, and the power supply was unreliable and inadequate. In the spring, the line was extended west to Toughkenneman and south into Delaware to Yorkland. Over the summer of 1903, work was rushed on a new powerhouse in Kennett Square and on completing the line to Brandywine Springs. On August 8th, regular service between Kennett Square and Brandywine Springs was finally begun. Now, in contrast to the People's line, a through fare cost 20 cents from Kennett Square to Brandywine Springs, and another 5 cents to switch cars to a People's car to take you into Wilmington. So how exactly did the line get from Yorkland to the Springs, and where did it go? That's a great question. And largely thanks to the work done years ago by the late Mel Schoenbeck, we have a really good idea of just where the tracks went. Now the line entered Delaware along Creek Road on the east side of Red Clay Creek. This is a car entering Delaware. Red Clay Creek off to the left, what was Creek Road at the time along it, and the trolley line up here. Creek Road today actually follows the roadbed of the old trolley line. It may be a little hard to see here, but there's an outcropping of rocks right in front of that trolley car, and those are actually still there alongside the roadway in Creek Road. Now, after the line went through there, it went down and went on to the Marshall property. It went behind Auburn Heights and looped down below what's now the Marshall Steam Museum and crossed Red Clay Creek around there to head into Yorkland. But before it did, there was a trolley stop on the Marshall property. It's a picture of the stop in a car by the angle of the pole. It looks like it's heading north. And the existence of this stop was actually stipulated by Israel Marshall in the deed that gave the rights to build a trolley line on his property. Also, he had made sure that there was a freight siding for the Marshall mill, and the Marshall family got to ride the trolley for free. Now, the fare from the Marshall stop to Kennett was 5 cents. At the next stop at Yorkland, it went up to 10 cents. So if anyone wanted to save a little bit of money, all they had to do was walk over to the Marshall property and jump on there. Now, after leaving the Marshalls, it's Auburn Heights up here. After leaving the Marshalls, it went over to the Yorkland Mills, then ran alongside the Wilmington and Western tracks down towards Hockessin. It came down there until it reached the Golden Clay Pit here. It went around that to go around the pit and also to gain elevation to cross the railroad tracks on a bridge right alongside Old Wilmington Road. It then rejoined the railroad tracks and ran along with them for a little bit towards Hockessin, eventually veering off and heading down to cross Lancaster Pike. The line then came down towards Mill Creek Road, ran along the east side of Mill Creek Road for a little bit, and then headed a little bit farther east to make sure that it stayed always on the east side of Mill Creek, which ran down along through here. The line continued down through crossing Brackenville Road, always staying on the east side of Mill Creek, down around Graves Road, They crossed Mill Creek Road and ran for a stretch between the creek and the road. Down about 200 yards south of what today is Mockingbird Hill Road, it turned east, up the hill, and out of the Mill Creek Valley. This was known as Summit Hill, and it was the steepest grade on the line. It went up 125 feet in 0.6 of a mile, which they tell me is a 3.9% grade. Because of the grade of the hill and the distance from the powerhouse, the trolleys went up the hill pretty slowly. Slowly enough, in fact, that apparently boys would sometimes jump off the car, run alongside it, and then jump back on at the top of the hill. At the top of the hill, it ran along what today is Oak Ridge Road, and then it veered southeast, crossing McKinnon's Church Road and Newport Gap Pike. Here we're coming across McKinnon's Church Road and Newport Gap Pike, crossed Hyde Run here about the same point, and then went again a bit to the east to stay on the east side of Hyde Run, came down across Mill Creek Road, veered a bit more to the east, then came down crossing Newport Gap Pike right above Falkland Road, across Hyde Run here, came down across Falkland Road and Hyde Run one more time, and then started a gentle turn towards the park. Now, at first, the line did not go directly into the park. Instead, it followed down Newport Gap Pike, this blue stretch here, towards the Cedars, came down here, made a gentle turn across what was then an empty lot so that it could maintain speed, to then go up Washington Avenue, down across another vacant lot, across Hyde Run, and into the park. So now you're thinking, why would they build an extra half mile of track and not just go directly into the park at the top, near the lake? And that's another good question. Now, besides the fact that at first, the line into the park was not built, but there was a long time when it was there and the line still came down here. So why would they do that? There are two theories that I've heard people come up with, and both involve Richard Crook. The first one was, if you recall from earlier, that white house at the corner of Washington Avenue and Newport Gap Pike was Crook's house. And one idea is that in return for granting the rights to enter the park, he said that the trolley line had to run by his house so that he had an easy way to commute into the park each day. Now, a second idea has to do with that other plan that took a long time to come to fruition, and that is the spur into Marshallton. Because the idea was that he wanted to have the Westchester, Kennett, and Wilmington build that first section of that spur. And sure enough, when the Marshallton line was built in 1909, the line did come up and out Washington Avenue along those same tracks that had been built by the Kennett trolley 6 years earlier. Now, when the Marshallton spur was built, finally this lower section was abandoned and the line was built directly into the park along the lake. Now, this is a picture that was taken probably from the top of the Scenic Railway, which was the roller coaster at the amusement park. It's looking over across the lake. You see the large building here is the dance hall that was built out on the lake. In the distance here, you can see the trolley line coming across the field, crossing Newport Gap Pike, which is running up the hill here. The trolley came in along the lake, between the lake and the hillside. This is a picture, basically the same shot looking back the other way. You can see a little bit of the Scenic Railway, the roller coaster in the background here. You can't really see the lake, but this is the dance hall that's out on the lake. Now we see a trolley car between us and the lake. Now initially, as the trolleys came past the lake, they would run between the boathouse here, this white building, and the stairway that was built going up the hillside. Now, it's hard to see from this angle, but there is room between the boathouse and that staircase for this freight car to either run through or have just run out. Now, a few years later, the rooftop garden theater was built on top of the boathouse and connected actually to the hillside here. And at that point, the trolleys did actually go through this little tunnel and run underneath the theater and then into the park proper. Now, that picture with the freight car a moment ago was interestingly appropriate because the freight line was just about the only thing that kept the Westchester, Kennett, and Wilmington line alive as long as it was. The trouble started right away, too. With little ridership that first winter of 1903-04, the line faltered and went into receivership in April. They got permission to extend the line to Avondale, and regular service was running there by September. But with the money problems, extending the line to Oxford was not going to happen. However, they did kind of pull the same trick that Richard Crook had done a few years earlier, and they got a charter for a new company to build another line 4 miles to West Grove, and that section was in use by April 1906. In the meantime, the Westchester, Kennett, and Wilmington had been sold at a sheriff's sale in April 1905. When the new management came in and was trying to figure out how to make the line profitable, one of the first things they did was to talk to the farmers along the route. It turned out that they were really very interested in shipping their freight by trolley. And within a few years, the line was carrying almost all of the freight that was generated along the line. Now, here's a picture of one of those freight cars, I believe, in Kennett Square. Now, they didn't have that many cars, so it's possible that could be the same freight car that we saw in the Brandywine Springs picture. Now, this service was usually cheaper and faster than shipping by railroad, especially if you're just shipping to Wilmington. By October 1905, through freight service was running into Wilmington using the People's Railway tracks. Late the next year, through passenger service was tried, but it only ran for a few months. Throughout the rest of the run, the freight service was about the only thing that kept the line anywhere near afloat. Turned out that there wasn't as much demand for passenger service from Kennett Square to Wilmington as the owners hoped. The line more or less stumbled along into the early 1920s, as did by that time what had been the People's Railway. Now, considering that the entire reason for being for both lines was the existence of the park, their demise was linked to pretty much exactly what you'd think, and that is the decline of the park. However, the end of the park era is really a bit of a muddled mess. There were sort of two closings. As I mentioned, the Brandywine Springs was never really quite the same after the 1915 sale and merger. By the early 20s, it had basically devolved back into what it started out as in the late 1880s. That was pretty much just a picnic park. The rides slowly disappeared over the years, some not being rebuilt or repaired, and some seem to have been moved to Shell Pop Park. The newspaper ads from the 20s had lots of attractions listed for Shell Pop Park, lots of rides and shows, and then something down at the bottom like, take a nice trolley ride and have a picnic for Brandywine Springs. Now, the last year that the park was officially open was 1923. There was talk of it being rebuilt and refurbished and new attractions added, but none of that ever happened. This first closing was enough to send the Westchester, Kennett, and Wilmington over the financial edge. The company was no longer able to keep up on its significant debt, and it ceased operation on March 31st, 1923. There was a short-lived attempt by some Yorkland area residents, including the Marshalls, to keep at least the freight service going, but to no avail. The old People's Railway Brandywine Springs line was able to carry on a while longer since it was part of a larger company. However, by the 1929 season, the park was really closed for reals this time. With the drop-off in ridership, the Delaware Electric Power Company, who owned the trolley line at the time, announced that the last cars to Brandywine Springs and Marshallton would run on October 26, 1929. At that point, the trolley line would end at the workhouse at Greenbank, and buses would run from the city to the Cedars on Newport Gap Pike. Now, the timing of this was probably pretty fortuitous, because if the timing of late October 1929 sounds familiar, all this was happening right in the middle of the stock market crash. It would actually culminate 3 days later with the Black Tuesday crash on October 29th. So after that, I don't see any way that they would have been able to get the money to do the rebuilding and refurbishing of the line that would have been needed to keep it running. Now, 3 years later, on May 21st, 1932, the last trip was made over the old Brandywine Springs line. The line was abandoned, and bus service to Marshallton was expanded. All along, one major factor in the demise of the trolley parks and the trolley lines that I haven't really mentioned yet was the rise of the automobile. As cars became more common and more widespread, people didn't have to just rely on the trolley to go to work or to just jump on the trolley and take it out to the park. They could take their car to work, they could drive to the mountains to go camping, they could go to the beach or the shore for their amusement, their vacations, and not just jump on the trolley to the park. So after the lines stopped running, some of the cars were scrapped and some were sent to locales that still had track trolleys running. Now, most of them have been lost to history, but there does happen to be one car that I know of that did run on the People's Railway lines, and I credit Tom Gears for bringing this one to my attention. On May 15th, 1902, a 20-foot closed car was delivered to Richard Crook from the Laclede Car Company of St. Louis. After the 1915 merger, it was renumbered and transferred to the Wilmington and Philadelphia Traction Company. In 1929, maybe because of the Brandywine Springs line closure, it was sent to Philadelphia to be used as a rail grinding car, first on the trolley line and then later on the Broad Street subway. It was retired in 1971 and at some point acquired by the Electric City Trolley Museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And that's where it sits today. This is the car. This is the beautifully restored interior, which looks a lot like that picture of the bungalow car that we saw earlier. Notice all the beautiful woodwork inside of it. And you'll even notice that it was restored to the original People's Railway colors of green and yellow or cream. By reading it, I don't even think that they knew that that's what it was when they restored it, but they found traces of that paint underneath. They restored it to its original state. This car serves as a great link back to the glory days of Brandywine Springs and the trolley lines that serviced it. Thank you all for sticking around, and thank you for coming out tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. And does anybody have any questions?
Thanks so much, Scott. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Did have a question. When you said People's, is this the same People's now, like People's Plaza, construction, etc.?
I don't think so. I don't know the history of that, but I have a feeling that that's probably, there was also a family around. There was a People's family. Actually, they own, among other things, a farm where Hercules is now along Newport Gap, or along Lancaster Pike near Wooddale. So I have a feeling that's probably there. I think Richard Crook named this line the People's Railway because it was for the people.
Perfect. So Allie's having a little technical difficulty. Her computer died. Seems to be Friday. I feel like it should be. So I'm just going to quickly try to get her resituated. But does anybody else have any questions for Scott? Comments? I mean, I'm seeing good job. It's neat. So, and you know what, Scott, at the beginning of this, we all talked about what got you into history. So if you wanted to, and that was before our stream went crazy. So if you wanted to just let people know what that is about, I'm sure that they would love to hear it.
Yeah, the short version is I've always been interested in history, and at some point started researching and looking at some local history. One of the first things I found was a beautiful 1868 map that I have on the homepage of my blog, and it's there because that's kind of what got me started. I kind of looked into seeing how many of the houses on that map, because that map shows all the landowners, major landowners and properties in the area. And I kind of started looking to see how many of those houses were still around. I found that there was a lot more than I thought there were, and started researching it, finding some information, decided that, some of these things are kind of confusing. If I go through and start writing some of this out, then I've got to have it pretty straight in my head if I'm going to make it clear enough for somebody else to understand it. I started writing some things, decided to put up on a blog to see if there was anyone else that might be interested in it. And it turns out there are people that like this kind of stuff. And Denise asked if the tracks were put up around the park. To the best of my knowledge, after the lines were abandoned and the section from Greenbank through to the park stopped running in 1929, the tracks were probably torn up, the rails were probably reused or taken somewhere. Even today, sometimes you can still find spikes from the trolley line, which look a lot like a railroad spike, but smaller. And you can still find them sometimes around in the park, in Brandywine Springs Park and some other areas. But I don't think that there's any traces of any of the tracks still around now. That metal was probably too valuable to leave laying around for too long.
So earlier this evening, we had a request for you to show some pictures later. So if you'd like to share your presentation with us, Scott, I can certainly have that available for people to view as well.
Sure.
Unless there are specific pages that you guys really wanted for him to go back over, I can certainly do that for you.
Have you ever noticed any advertisements for Greenbank Mill? Any of the visual evidence? There are ads for the mill at various times for various owners. I know I'm sure we've seen some of this. I've even found want ads, even going back to the Phillips era mill. Want ads for anyone that had experience in woolen mill work and textile work. And later on, I think I've seen some ads for flour, for milling services at the mill. Now, I know some of the pictures, I've done a couple of blog posts on my blog about this one about the People's Trolley, one about the Kennett Trolley. And there are some pictures on there, I don't remember offhand what is there, but some of them are on those posts as well. And he advertised as far as what then there was always advertising back in the amusement park, almost every week for the park. And that's a neat way. I know people like Mark Waller wrote an excellent book about Brandywine Springs years ago. one of the best ways to learn about the park and what was there and what was going on is to look each week at the newspaper ads and see what they consider to be important, what they're advertising, if there were new attractions or shows that came through or traveling bands. John Philip Sousa's band would come through and play there. There's a lot of advertising for the park over the years.
So the pictures are just all of them here, because I mean, this is why I go to your blog all the time. You have a knack for finding the most amazing pictures. So if it's possible, we will definitely try to make those available for you guys. Absolutely. They will be available on our website afterwards in a few days, but I do know that there was an issue with the captioning. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I was really trying to make this video be accessible for everybody, but I got so when you try to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody, and that's on me. So I apologize for that. There is noise. I hear that as well. I do apologize for that as well. For me, it's my dog snoring. I don't know if that's what you guys are hearing.
Might be me. Hold on.
So we can certainly make those available for you. And Scott does have a lot of really amazing pictures and backstory, similar to what you've just witnessed on his blog as well. So I'm going to put up the link to that for you guys to look at. Just click it down. Because as Matt has said, and we've said previously, Scott's blog is just a godsend to those of us that are trying to rep local history, especially those of us that are not local to the area. It really gives us a very unique way to look back at things. Like we can read books, and those we do, obviously. But Scott's blog really takes you back in a local way, like you're actually sitting down and you're talking to the people that have lived it, because it sounds like that's what he's done, or he's focused on the stories, which is what helps connect things a little bit better. And this area is just, it's a tapestry of different people's stories just kind of being woven together, and that makes it ever more important for stuff like what Scott's doing, just to kind of help connect it with everybody.
Yeah, I find that also, I mean, I talked about it before, that a lot of times you can't really understand these stories until you make those connections. That a lot of times if you see some of the primary sources of things that were written, like the National Historic Register form or Del Dot archaeological reports, things like that, they're focusing for a good reason just on one particular site. But a lot of times that leaves out part of the picture, because a lot of times those sites are connected to farms around them or the families around them, and you don't really understand the whole story until you kind of broaden your view a bit and get the whole web of the community, really, because none of these houses, mills, churches were there just by themselves. They were occupied by people who lived in a community, and all the things were very connected, and a lot of times stories don't make sense until you see the whole story.
Yeah, exactly. If you're just looking at a brief, it's like no context theater. Like sometimes it's hilarious. Most of the time it's just confusing. Brilliant. Do you guys have any other questions for us, or anything that you'd like to see going forward? What maybe wanting to send Scott down a rabbit hole, perhaps?
I feel like that's not hard to do.
I could do that all by myself. That's actually one of the problems, going that idea of everything being connected, that when I'm researching a particular topic, sometimes the hardest thing to do is to figure out where to draw the line or where to stop.
Right.
Because you start connecting and widening and go, okay, well, their family lived here, and then this son grew up and bought a farm over here. And okay, so now I want to see what that is. And I start, nope, that's another time. It's for another time. I'll do another time. So sometimes, yeah, the hardest part is just knowing when to stop.
I feel like that was
another time.
Well, that's.
So Scott, sorry. I cut in and out a little bit, so I apologize if you already answered this question, but do you know if there's any trolley cars still around anywhere?
At the very end of the program, if I can still,
That's where I cut out.
there's one car left that I know of, and I credit Tom Gears was the one that brought this to my attention. And up again, I'll show you this car at the Electric City Trolley Museum in Scranton. They have lots of different trolley cars. This one here, Tommy and I actually each independently researched and verified this by the numbering on it and all this. This was a car that was purchased by the People's Railway in 1902. It stayed with them until 1915. Was transferred eventually to Philadelphia and worked as a rail grinding car, which that's another fun thing is what you start doing some of this research and you come up with a term, what is that again? So you have to go and then learn what that is. Rail grinding cars were cars that just went and kind of kept the tracks straight and smooth. It was just a work car. And it was retired in 1971, and then this museum bought it eventually. And it's there. So this is a car that did actually run on the People's Railway line. And that's that one there.
Very cool.
That's the only one I know of. I would say most of them were just torn up and used for scrap over the years.
So someone might have trolley car scrap in their house and not know it.
Could be. As I say, you still find the spikes around.
That's true.
I've been to so many like history buffs' house in the area, and it's like, hey, let me show you this thing from here. I'm like, man.
Yeah, there's a lot like that. Not just trolleys, but for barns and sheds. And because when you think about it, 100, 150, 200 years ago, you could just pop down to Home Depot to buy material. So you reuse material as much as you could. So coming down, neighbors and people would come and just salvage it. So yeah, there's parts of barns and sheds and fences and chicken coops and things like that all over the place in people's houses and things like that. Yeah, there was stuff that was salvaged, so shall we say, by people over the years.
Yeah, our Miller's our Miller's house has the cabinets I think were salvaged from another building in the area.
Yeah, now it's kind of cool and retro to use barn wood and things like that and reused wood. And back then they did it out of necessity, not necessarily out of environmental concerns, but just because it was already here.
Historians were being cool before it was cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Well, awesome, guys. And thank you very much, Scott, for joining us tonight and the awesome presentation.
Thank you.
My dog is thanking you as well.
We'll right back to you.
So we are going to be live. I have been working while listening to Scott, trying to iron out some of the tech issues that we experienced. And that's my sole mission this week, is to make sure that doesn't happen again. So that way it's a lot more of a smoother experience for everybody. It's just as a note, if you like this, please do donate. Send us an email, let us know. We're going to be sending out a survey afterwards. I promise you we don't sell your information. This is just so that we know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what you guys want us to stop doing, like, hey, Stacy, stop talking so much. Totally can do that. And that just helps figure out who we're serving, and we want to make sure that, especially now that we're helping bring you guys historical content that actually means something. And that's ever our goal. That's why we have people like Scott come on and Tommy. They're really good at, when they express interest in something, it's usually something that you all really want to hear about. So So there's that. So next week is going to be Tommy again. He's going to be telling the story of Katrina Pusey. So we're really excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
So the event for that is live, and you'll have the option to sign up, to donate, to register to vote, because that's important, and purchase gear. So the gear is available on our website. You can purchase the 3/4 length shirts like Allie and I are wearing. You can purchase this bad boy. We will be making our brandy snifters available. I have to go to the mill and pick those up so I can get a picture of them for you. And we'll also be releasing another item on Sunday. So watch out for us on Facebook. We'll also be doing next week Facebook Live. And the link is available. I've added a live tab on our Facebook page, so it's a little bit easier, because I know we all had a little bit of an issue. It seems when I add a donate button, the rest of it goes away. So it should be a little bit easier to access next time around. And I'll be sending out emails to anybody who signs up through Eventbrite, so that you'll get to see the link, and you'll have it in your inbox a little bit easier to access. So that's all from me. Happy Friday, everybody.
Yes. Scott, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Scott. You're amazing.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for setting us up and doing the hard tech work.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hopefully you replace that water with something more
I'm going
interesting.
to go replace
Yeah, I'm talking about beer and going to Braylock Brewery. I mean, come on now.
I'm going to upgrade this, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Just swap it out with glass, right? All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. We'll catch you